Mississippi eviction laws vary from county to county, but they still follow the same general steps for an eviction process. Fill out the forms, serve the tenant, attend the trial, and wait for judgment. Every eviction process is different. It depends on the lease or rental agreement signed by the tenant and the landlord. In this video, we'll go over a summary for landlords to refer to when evicting a tenant. A landlord may also seek legal advice from an attorney, which is highly recommended to ensure the process goes as smoothly as possible. So without further ado, let's get started. First, let's go over some common reasons a landlord may evict a tenant. Non-payment of rent. To start off the Mississippi eviction process, rent is usually considered late a day past its due. A grace period may be available if stated within the lease or a written agreement. Before a landlord can start the eviction process, they must give a tenant in Mississippi an official written 3-day notice to pay form. If the tenant can pay the rent within those 3 days, then the filing for eviction does not continue. If they cannot pay rent, the landlord reserves the right to continue filing to evict a tenant. Breach of the lease or rental agreement. The terms of the lease have to be upheld by both the tenant and the landlord for the entire duration of their stay. Agreements may vary from tenant to tenant. If a tenant fails to uphold any terms from the lease agreement, the landlord must give a 14-day notice to quit form. If the tenant resolves these issues on time, the eviction process must not continue. Lease violations may include damage to the rental property, smoking in non-smoking areas, keeping pets in pet-free properties, etc. Engaging in illegal behavior on or near the property. If the lease violations are not resolved or they remain on the property within that amount of time, then the landlord must continue with the process to evict a tenant. Material health or safety violation. Mississippi law takes into account the health, building, safety, and housing codes. If a tenant violates any of these codes, the landlord is not legally obligated to give the tenant time to fix the problem, nor are they required to send a written notice. Violations under this could include not throwing out trash for long periods of time, inviting bugs or rodents, damaging the electrical wiring of a unit, ruining the plumbing fixtures of a unit. You can skip the notice steps for this violation. Non-renewal of the lease after the rental period ends. In Mississippi, landlords cannot take eviction action against a tenant or force them to vacate the property without a probable clause and without a notice. As long as the tenant does not violate any rules, they can stay within the days of their rental period. But if they stay in the property even a day after their lease or rental agreement ends and have not arranged for a renewal, a landlord may issue a written notice to move. Filing a complaint. How to file a complaint. The eviction process can only begin after the issuance of an appropriate eviction notice. An appropriate notice period must have been allowed before filing for eviction. The eviction process steps as follow. Proceed to the Mississippi Justice Court the rental property belongs to. File a complaint. Pay the fees. There may be more steps depending on your Justice Court's rules and regulations. Timeline. It takes within 3 days to 1 month from the issuance of the notice to vacate or quit. The notice must have been given to the tenant properly. This is ensured with the return receipt signed by the tenant. Notice to comply. Before filing an eviction with the court, you need to issue the tenant a notice to comply. Serving the tenant. How to serve a tenant. An official from the court delivers the summons for the hearing and the complaint to the tenant at least 5 days in county court before the return date. The sheriff's office is usually assigned to this task. Alternatively, someone else who is at least 18 years old and is not involved in any aspect of the case may be assigned to this task. There are several methods available to serve these documents: personal service, substituted service, publishing, posting, and mailing. The sheriff's office may hold the final say in this method. After serving the summons and complaint, the tenant has at least 5 days before the eviction hearing date to prepare if they are in county court. Timeline. The document should be served to the tenant within 5 days before the hearing. A postponement of the hearing, called a continuance, can be requested for a maximum of 10 days if the eviction is about non-payment of rent. The landlord has to provide a strong argument backed up by solid evidence against the tenant. If the tenant fails to appear at the hearing, the landlord wins by default. Next procedure, if the tenant disagreed and replied. In the state of Mississippi, a reply from the tenant is not necessary for a court date to be scheduled. They only have to show up to the hearing. The landlord needs to support the claim with evidence and show it during the court hearing. This could include, but is not limited to, the following: copy of the deed and the lease, copy of any notices given to the tenant, rent receipts and ledgers, bank statements, witness information, photo and video documentation of the violations, timeline. Eviction hearings are scheduled 5 to 10 days after the summons and complaint is issued, regardless of when the documents were served to the tenant. Getting possession. After the landlord wins the case, provided that the tenant does not appeal for reconsideration, a writ of execution is a court order that is issued either immediately or 5 days after judgment was granted to the landlord. If the eviction hearing was about non-payment of rent, the writ of execution is given immediately, but it will be released after 5 days for other types of eviction orders. Move-out process. There is no clear time frame for when the tenant has to move out once the writ or court order is issued. At best, they have a maximum of 5 to 8 days to move out of the rental property. However, if it was an eviction about failure to pay rent, they must immediately move out. Timeline. The tenants have a few hours to 8 days upon the court's order issuance of the writ of execution to vacate the property. Mississippi eviction timeline. On average, it would take anywhere between half a month to 2 months for a complete eviction process. Showing evidence. If the tenant disagrees with the eviction request and they reply to the court, it's important that you keep extremely good records of everything so you can provide proof to the judge and win your case. This part can either make or break your entire eviction request in the event of a dispute. Evidence to show for not paying rent. If the tenant does not pay rent and they dispute that claim, it's important that you show the judge the following: your lease agreement, all payments, all payment returns, and all messages. Evidence to show for lease violations. If you are evicting the tenant for lease violations, for example, noise complaints, unauthorized pets, or property damage, it's important to show proof from any of the following methods: security cameras, videos, pictures, and lease terms. And that's a wrap for today's video on the Mississippi eviction process. We hope you found this video helpful and informative, but hold on, there's still more to uncover about the eviction process in Mississippi. If you want to explore this topic further, we've got you covered. In the description below, you'll find a link to a detailed blog post that dives deep into the eviction process in Mississippi. It covers everything from notice requirements and legal proceedings to tenant rights and landlord responsibilities. It's an invaluable resource for landlords and tenants in Mississippi. So thank you so much for watching today's video. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.